going on, guys? What? Wait a minute. I forgot to turn the lens. Hold on.
Oh, I did too.
What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode on the
Lines Out of Outta podcast.
I'm a little bit everywhere. I'm Nathan Blank.
I'm Caden Parisian. We got some fun topics to talk about today.
So, this is going to be a little bit more of an unscripted. Not that we normally are super scripted, but I'm going to be perfectly honest. Caden told me the topic of today's discussion about 3 hours ago, and I've kind of half forgotten about it, so we're going to talk about that soon. So, before we get any farther into this episode, I want to give a huge thank you to Sasha Spinners for sponsoring this podcast. If you guys already know, it's a local company here in Winnipeg that makes the best hand-tied, high-quality catfish rigs, spinner rigs, and it's just an absolute must if you're fishing on the Red River here in Manitoba. You need to be using the 60-pound test that these catfish rigs have and these super sharp hooks. It's an absolute necessity, especially with the big channel catfish we have. So I'm going to leave the link to the website in the description. Make sure you check it out. I would highly recommend you do so.
Topic today is we're kind of going to go with the flow, like Nathan said. We just got some ideas kind of floating around. So what we're going to be focused on today is how does fishing affect lakes throughout Manitoba? So whether that be overfishing, underfishing, lakes not being fished enough, the amount of fish being taken out of the lakes for healthy populations. Just kind of going to cover some water bodies as well. So Lake Winnipeg, Red River, obviously fished on a lot. They are very popular lakes here in Manitoba. And, maybe some remote lakes. Name a bunch there. Up in northern Manitoba, eastern, western. So we'll get started on that. What do you think about that?
So, before we get into the good stuff though,
Yes.
what have you been up to lately? Where have you been, Kate?
I've been working basically all summer. I got like a 4-day shift out in the bush at Crow Duck Lake Camp. It's a fishing camp in eastern Manitoba, if you guys don't know, in the Whiteshell Provincial Park. It is the biggest lake in the Whiteshell, and it is probably one of the most popular lakes to fish out in the eastern region. So
It's one of my top 5 favorite lakes, for one, but the amount of people that come into the store asking what they need for Crow Duck, like people specifically going to Crow Duck, it's out of this world. A lot of people know about it, but it's one of those places where it's super well managed in the aspect that it's a 2 walleye limit, whereas as of right now in Manitoba, it's a 4 walleye limit. There used to be a 6 limit with a general license and then a conservation license, but now it's obviously a 4 limit. But in Crow Duck, it's a 2-man. So the lake has a crazy walleye population. They're very abundant, and this is just a great example of meshing conservation with popularity and just having that happy medium. Probably more honestly on the extreme conservation side.
oh, for sure, yeah.
Like, it's even if they mandated it back to 4, the lake would still be absolutely amazing for walleye fishing. But it's one of those things where you kind of, I don't want to say nip it in the bud, but you're very strict about how you manage the lake, and it's proven to be extremely effective because it's an amazing water body.
Absolutely. And I'll speak from a dock staff point of view, and just a fisherman on that lake that fishes it basically every week. The fish there, like before, I think it was like, I want to say almost, maybe 6 to 10 years ago that you actually started to take walleye out of the lake. And before, you couldn't take anything out. So everything was a catch and release fishery, and these fish were big. So your average size was, if you caught a 22-inch walleye, people were laughing at you. Like a 24 to 28, 30-inch fish was your average fish of the day. But they were all big, like I said, but they had big heads, skinny bodies, and big tails, meaning that, they were unhealthy. But they would eat anything. You put a hot dog down on a circle hook and they would eat it. Even just a jig hook down there and they would eat it. They would kind of eat anything that got in their way. Obviously, starving for food, they would eat themselves if they really had to. But ever since the province of Manitoba said that you can take 2 walleyes out of Crow Duck, the population of fish has gotten a lot healthier. So we have a really nice, healthy population of, 16 to 22-inch fish. That's kind of like your average size now. It has gone down a lot, but we have started to see a lot more healthy 28 to 30, 31-inch fish caught there. I think our biggest this year was a 31.25-inch walleye caught there, and just like near
Probably
net,
just an
near
absolute
10
skinny
pounds.
rocket, eh?
No, it was
really
healthy, like stocky, like not skinny, but not
like
fat.
Winnipeg walleye.
Oh no, nothing like Lake Winnipeg. But very nice stocky fish. Wasn't fat, but wasn't skinny. Kind of a medium.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, but it was really good to see. But like I've been catching some really nice 22-inch fish that are just like thick all the way around in the stomach, just super thick. And the amount of bait fish and nutrients that lake has is absolutely crazy.
I don't know if it's considered eutrophic.
I have no idea. Yeah.
But yeah, it's very nutrient.
Absolutely.
All the schools of just bait fish we've seen in very deep water are just it's unreal. I mean, I still think the biggest schools of bait fish I've ever seen in my life are still in Lake Winnipeg. Obviously. I'm sure that's not the case in parts of Lake of the Woods, but it's absolutely unreal. And kind of going back to, this is why this perfectly ties into today's conversation in a way. For me lately, been going to U of M, University of Manitoba. I'm actually taking an environmental science path to become a fisheries biologist, something with fish and wildlife. So I've always been very interested in, not specifically maybe on fish themselves, I would be an ichthyologist, a biologist that's solely on fish, but fisheries is so complex.
Oh yeah.
Like it's one of those things that it's just, there's so many different factors and attributes and variables and this and that. It's so different everywhere. So that's why I think it's very interesting, but it's also very good. I mean, I would argue that I have interest in it because I fish, but that just that's just makes sense. But yeah, it's absolutely unreal how the more you go out there and the more you spend your time fishing, the more you realize you don't even know.
Oh yeah.
You learn about what you don't know what you don't know. Like I don't
exactly.
If that makes any sense. The more you learn, the more you realize that you still need to figure out. Like it's absolutely unreal.
The more times you're out on the water, like, you keep learning stuff,
yeah.
right? Or makes you question more stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll be randomly thinking things on water and have a question that not haunts me but dawns on me all day. Like, why is this temperature is a degree warmer than yesterday? Is it true that fish feel it 10 times more than humans? How is that so? How does the flow affect this fish as opposed to this fish? There's so many questions that you have, especially if you just self-analyze.
Yeah.
And that's why fishing is one of the greatest things ever, is that there's always something to figure out, so you're never really bored, which is what I
for sure, yeah. Even if the fishing is, not up to par or it's boring, you start to wonder why.
And even too, on days, and I'll take product for example, where we catch 200 fish a day. You're like, well, why? How? What did it do right? How is that even the case?
What was so perfect that had the outcome, right?
Is it just like this all the time? Or is it a certain spot? Why is it the way it is? Like, there's so many questions that, and I mean, some people might just be, literally just do it for fun. Don't really think about all the other elements to it. They just want to have a good time, which is perfectly fine. But yeah, and especially with tournament anglers and all this stuff and the technology, and there's so much more to figure out. You're able to figure out. It's absolutely unreal. It's just a rabbit hole, basically.
Absolutely. And every lake differs, right? Like, every lake is different. And, it just really makes you wonder, from the small trout ponds that we have to the ocean in the middle, Lake Winnipeg, right? So it really makes you wonder for sure.
Yeah.
And that perfectly ties into today's topic, like you said, how different lakes are affected differently, whether it be overfishing, underfishing, whatever, and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, and one of the cool things about environmental science, specifically with a focus area of natural resource management, it's how like ecosystems and fish and wildlife and nature and all that tie in with humans and their interaction and how that plays out, basically, so that you can have, if you learn how to conserve it properly for future generations, is kind of the whole outline that I've gotten from it. But I've kind of sat and wondered what certain water bodies would look like if there wasn't any human interaction with it, basically.
Absolutely.
If that makes any sense. Like it's very interesting because certain water bodies are hit differently, and there's a few different factors that make you think, well, if this was changed, this law for this certain water body or this certain rule, or if there wasn't this many boat launches or there wasn't this many houses or all the money and commercial value wasn't all around this lake, what would this lake look like if it was developed differently?
Like if Lake Winnipeg wasn't commercial fished.
Yeah, and it's actually unreal. I can't remember the number, but the amount of money
ridiculous.
or revenue that Lake Winnipeg makes off tourism and
the tourism attractions
in winter, it's unreal. And a lot of people from I guess everywhere, but the Dakotas, Minnesota's a big one because in Minnesota there's so many water bodies, but it's just like you could drive down the same road and have like 12 different water bodies with their small ponds. That's why Manitoba is incredible, because if you go more like northeast or even just more north in general, and you go more towards, I guess, the
northern hemisphere of Lake
way up there
area.
The lakes get smaller, but there's so many. If that makes sense, there's just water pockets if you look on Google Earth. Whereas when you come down more in the south, even eastern Manitoba, there's a lot more lakes, whatever. But it's unreal the diversity, I guess is the word. The differences all over Manitoba. Whereas with some places, and I don't know if this is fair to say, but like Lake of the Woods, maybe for the most part, it's a lot more like Ontario. There's a lot more just splotches of water bodies. But then again, Lake Winnipeg is ginormous.
Yeah, for sure. So and like you're saying too with Manitoba, how there's like splotches. You get that, and then you also get big lakes mixed in between. Like Cedar Lake is huge, absolutely humongous, and that's in the northern part of Manitoba. And then you get Lake Winnipegosis, which is right beside it. It's connected to Lake Manitoba, the two oceans beside each other. You got Clearwater Lake, and you got I can't remember the lake name. Oh no, sorry, that's Reindeer Lake. That's also in Saskatchewan. Never mind. But you got to mix in between because you got rivers that connect them, like the Grass River that feeds into Wekusko, Snow Lake, all those amazing fisheries that you can fish, and you got those small back lake ponds that are stocked with, or that have 20-inch brook trout in it that you would never realize.
Hunt Lake, McHugh, even Footprint,
Camp Lake,
all those places. Yeah, it's unreal the differences that you can have from this part of Manitoba, that part of Manitoba. Mm-hmm. You can target I guess not musky. Technically, you can go into, let's say, going in through like Heart Lake up the Winnipeg River, and if you go into Nunavik, you can catch the big ginormous sturgeon. If you go to the other part of wherever, you can catch stock trout. If you go all the way up here, Clearwater, you can catch lake trout. Like, it's actually insane if you think about it, but I sound like a broken record about me loving Lake Winnipeg.
Oh yeah.
But everything flows, like it's a major outlet. It's not an inlet, I guess it's an outlet because everything flows into it.
Basically almost everything from it's in the middle of North America flows into.
Is that considered an inlet or an outlet then? Why am I drawing a blank here? It's an inlet, everything's going in, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, sorry. But anyway, all throughout, starting from the Red River, if you go very south, it starts in the States, flows up into Lake Winnipeg. If you go, and this is just the South Basin, which alone is huge, never mind the North Basin. From Traverse Bay, starting more in Ontario, all the way coming in through all sorts of lakes throughout the Whiteshell, and then coming in through the Winnipeg River. Like, it's absolutely insane.
You also got Lake of the Woods, which is connected by the Rainy River. Mm-hmm. You get Rainy Lake involved. That all flows west, flows through Lake of the Woods, Winnipeg River, Lake Winnipeg, and then in the northern basin you got I can't remember if Cedar Lake flows. No, Lake Winnipeg flows into Cedar Lake, and then Lake Winnipeg also flows out. Can't remember the river name, but it also flows out into like Churchill area, like Hudson Bay. It flows out that way as well. Mm-hmm. So just many outlets and inlets that you have throughout that place, which explains the amount of nutrients that those walleyes have in that lake and what makes it a great fishery for sure.
Yeah. But examples of water bodies. Now, with certain lakes that take a beating more than others, I mean, a lot of it is accessibility. If, accessibility and I guess size would play a part in that. For example, Reynolds Ponds, Lafarge Pits, super accessible, and they're small, so they just get hit even harder. Whereas, I'm trying to think of places that are super accessible that you can like drive around the whole lake. Like, you know what I'm talking about? How with Lafarge you can drive around.
Lafarge you can drive around.
Literally the whole lake.
There's other places like in the Duck Mountains. I wouldn't say you could drive around them, but if you had a boat, you could hit like 8 lakes in 5 hours. Like, it's ridiculous because there's one road that drives, or there's a couple roads that run up to the mountain there. But if you drive down the one road, you can hit like 6 lakes that are all stocked with trout. Same with Twin Lakes too. Twin Lakes is really accessible, right off the highway there, and those highways all hit the lakes. Like, it's close to Laurie Lake, and then like East Blue, West Blue. It kind of all hits the lakes at the same time, so you can, that's one of their good fisheries out there as well.
So, for example, let's say, for 1, 2, location-wise, let's talk about Lafarge and Reynolds.
Mm-hmm.
It's fairly close to everything. It's
like 45 minutes from the city.
It's 45 minutes from the city. Most areas of Manitoba, you can drive to it somewhat. It's not like it's in the very corner or whatever. But very accessible. It's one of those things where
it's fished way too much.
It's just fished way too much. And if you could probably ask your dad, because he would probably know better than us what it looked like 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah.
But
I believe like the backstory behind it was like back in the day, like 20, 30, 40 years ago, it was kind of like a party spot because they had pits there and stuff like that. So you go ride your quads, your dirt bikes, go have parties there or whatever it may be. But I believe the province of Manitoba was doing studies with some fish in the ponds there, and that's kind of how it took off.
I know the North Pond. There was actually a University of Manitoba project in Lafarge Pits. It's one of the bluegill ones, I think.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, it was...
Yeah, doing experiments with them. I think they're also doing experiments with tiger trout as well, breeding trout, doing some studies in that area, and that's just how it kind of took off with, they got largemouth and smallmouth in there, and in some pits, not in Lafarge area, but in, pits closer to Manitoba too, there's walleye in them. Like, it's, you never know really what you're going to catch out of Lafarge or Reynolds, wherever it may be.
And the super not random side notes, but just side notes, yeah. So the whiteshell fisheries hatchery, I can't remember the road it's on, but it's in the whiteshell. A lot of, like, if you watch, there's a... I can't remember, I think there was some collaboration with Hunt Fish Manitoba, or it was... What's the Manitoba Hunt and Wildlife Fund, that big one? Manitoba Wildlife?
Manitoba Wildlife... No.
Yeah,
Manitoba Wildlife Federation.
Yeah, I think they did a video on it, like going through a tour and all that, but it's a great place where they do a lot of the breeding. Because with, let's say, Reynolds, for example, like, first of all, stock trout don't reproduce naturally. Like, they don't, and they're super fragile fish. They're not hardy at all.
Yeah, the trout or the ponds that they live in aren't suitable for their spawning locations. So, like, you go up north, like far northern hemisphere, like Arctic char, like anything that connects into the ocean up there, that that provides a perfect spawning territory for those trout, like the bull trout, Arctic char, like I was saying, brook trout, the little streams, and since it's so cold up there, trout love cold water. So yeah, it provides perfect habitat and temperature for them.
Super random, not random again, but another side note, these things keep coming to me. I just found out, I don't know why they put 2 and 2 together. You know the relation, I don't know if I told you this, the relation between rainbow trout and steelhead?
Yes.
What is it?
They like the same thing.
Well,
they're just called different.
A rainbow trout, a steelhead is a migratory rainbow trout. I don't think it's a subspecies,
that's what I thought it was.
But we learned about this in evolution. We're going to go so off topic, this is so brutal. So we didn't come from monkeys, there's a common ancestor, there's always a fork in the road. So, for example, us humans and monkeys had a common ancestor. There's a fork in the road, natural selection. This ancestor goes one way, turns into monkeys. This goes one way, turns into humans. So tying back to, I'm going to try and make the point here and not make it sound stupid, is I can't remember if rainbow trout, some decide to migrate, some decide to not, and these ones turn to steelhead. Because if you look at steelhead, besides the markings, the actual frame and shape, it's like it's a rainbow trout on steroids, and they're not that fragile.
Yeah,
but
they're huge.
It's super cool. It's super neat.
Yeah,
how the environment shapes you.
Oh, no kidding.
Like
you said, the fork in the road. How some like a very like close species can go one way, like the migratory rainbow trout, and then the other way can just go to being a fragile dumb trout that lives in a pond, right? Like,
But going back to what I was saying, with all these places, like the Whiteshell Hatchery, and just conservation organizations and all that, it's very important. But with Reynolds and Lafarge, it's very interesting how there's largemouth bass, and a lot of the time, I don't know exactly, like if you look at the Manitoba, government of Manitoba stocking list, they'll do a stocking list, whatever, but there's a lot of brood stocks, which means there's the big adults that are bred in the fisheries, like the hatcheries, and actually another good example, the Fort White Alive, the center there, they do a lot of stuff like that. But yeah, there'll be the adult fish that do major spawning with the milt and the eggs, and eventually, after a couple of years, they don't really keep them, so they just send them into Reynolds or Lafarge for someone else to catch because it's near the end of their life. And at that point, they're pretty beaten up. They'll have the forked snout.
They'll do that with
the males. Will have that.
They'll do that in Hunt and Camp Lake and Lions Lake because the Whiteshell Fish Hatchery is right there.
Yeah, Lions is. I always hear about Lions. I think that's one of the lakes that's
Lions is one of the lakes. I fished it like maybe 4 years ago or something like that, and all I was marking, like I was marking fish, but I looked down the hole and it's like fingerlings like that. Yeah. So like basically not catchable. And I had my gain up so high because I was trying to mark these fish, and then all of a sudden this big red blob came out of nowhere and hammered one of my spoons, and it was a trout like this big. So nothing like a rainbow trout that big. So nothing crazy. But I know people do some videos on Lions Lake, and they do pull out some hogs out of there. Yeah. And that's going to be those fish, like we were saying, the fish that are near the end of their lifespan, that are kind of chunked into the lakes, Hunt Lake, Lions, Camp, McHugh, all those lakes there.
And that's why I pay a lot of attention to the Master Angler app, because you'll kind of see the certain time of year where they're sent out. Yeah. It's either, I can't remember if it's spring or fall. I'm pretty sure
I think it's fall.
I think it's fall too, where they'll send them out. You'll see all the pictures of the people catching them. Even too with the big largies when they send them out. I've heard of, I don't know, I can't confirm it, but there's one specific largie that's like huge. It's like
I've heard that.
I think it's at least 4 pounder. But it's sitting in one of the ponds and it's super picky because it's seen every lure known to man. Everyone and their dog fishes in there. But it's one of those things where it's super accessible. The fish are already they're not very wild, they're almost
like pets.
They're like pets. They're almost. Not at all there health-wise. But
that's like what's the lake? Twin Lakes. Like Twin Lakes is a stock trout pond. The pond isn't very big, but you get a lot of big trout out of there, and you get a lot of the same trout being caught every single year. So that's, if you look at Manitoba Master Angler Awards too, like you can sometimes pick out almost the exact same fish markings because of how many times that fish have been caught. Don't get me wrong, there is a lot of trout in Twin Lakes and those small trout lakes in the Duck Mountains, Laurie Lake. I can keep going on the list there. I'm not totally certain of the names, but Twin Lakes and Laurie Lake are the two that I'm familiar with. Laurie Lake, I can't remember where I saw it. It was probably on YouTube. But some guy got in contact with another guy on Instagram, and they identified the exact same fish, I think 2 times, exact fish being caught, and then a different fish with different markings got caught twice again in the same lake. And I believe, that was brown trout, sorry, yes. 2 of the exact same brown trout were caught at a Laurie Lake, and I could imagine the same thing probably with Twin Lakes, considering the size of it and just how many fish are in there.
Yeah. It's so different.
Oh, absolutely.
It's unreal how, and again, shifting to Lake Winnipeg, how over a certain period of time. First of all, I don't think this conversation is linear. like we're just gonna talk about what comes to mind. But shifting to Lake Winnipeg, because I was kind of thinking back to when I was younger, and people who know the area know how the white bass. If you were fishing on Lake Winnipeg, on the shores of Lake Winnipeg like a decade ago, you were catching white bass.
Yeah.
At least on the east side. I can't totally confirm about the south side, west side, but I'm pretty sure that even then they were catching white bass.
Well, I live on the west side of not live on the west side of Lake Winnipeg, but my grandparents do.
Yeah.
And I haven't caught one myself, which I wish I really did. But a couple of years ago, they had a winter of the white bass where they were catching white bass through the ice. It was the weirdest thing because everyone's like, "What is this?" They thought it was like a perch or a tulipy or something like that. No, it's the white bass, and they were catching white bass using 4-inch rattle baits. It was the weirdest thing.
Yeah, I saw there was a real life with Mike video.
Yeah.
He caught one. He was with Stag on the line, a few people.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I kind of watched it. I'm like, yeah, the white bass. I didn't really think of that.
Because you'll catch a lot of white bass, or I wouldn't say a lot, but your best chance of actually catching a white bass is going to be the mouth of the Winnipeg River system.
Yeah.
So in Traverse Bay, you run into a few smallmouth there. But yeah, for the most part, white bass are pretty heavy in the Winnipeg River system, so they will sneak their way out into Lake Winnipeg, and that's how I'm assuming they got into Lake Winnipeg in the South Basin, because everyone's fishing by the mouth. Like all the documented white bass that I heard of, they were fishing for greenbacks at the mouth of the river. So
yeah, and obviously Lake Winnipeg being so odd is not for every fish species. I don't know if the white bass. I think primarily, honestly, the zebra mussels probably hit them pretty bad.
Oh yeah,
somehow. Not somehow, but in
a certain way.
In a certain way that
every fish
just
different.
Completely dominated their existence. But
But yeah, like after that, they the next winter disappeared.
Yeah,
didn't catch a single one. So they either migrated, they didn't like their environment, migrated up the red, or back up to where they came from.
Back to the States. We're out of here.
Or just died. Either one. Yeah. Went north.
We were talking about this too, because I was at Powerview Pine Falls 2 days ago, and just past the launch, if you look on a map, so it'll be on the south side of the river, and if you look to the west, it go up into Traverse Bay into Lake Winnipeg. And we got on the launch, we were just in front of it, and my friend caught a smallmouth, which it's the Winnipeg River. It's not completely out there, but it's kind of odd because that close to the mouth of Traverse Bay, any smallmouth that sees that and sees that structure, like I remember there being a wall in Traverse Bay, and then it turns into Lake Winnipeg, like we know it, the flat nothingness, and I could just only imagine that smallmouth going nope, right back up the Winnipeg River.
Yeah, there has been some people catching people who fish Traverse Bay and the Winnipeg River system will know where I'm talking about. But Robertson's Rock, it's a rock in the middle of Traverse Bay. It's one of the more popular spots in the fall time for catching walleye. But people do catch white bass and smallmouth bass around that rock, which is in Lake Winnipeg. Still very bizarre.
So weird smallmouth bass in Lake Winnipeg.
But that's the one little form of structure that is in a very flat and boring place. So that's obviously why they're there. Probably at a certain time of year. Probably in the springtime is what I'm assuming, because they could be spawning on the shores of the lake.
Yeah.
Where it's all shallow, because Traverse Bay, 20% of it's pretty shallow, and then the rest of it's deep as you go further out. But yeah, that's kind of just where they hang out. A couple people have caught them there.
It's crazy to think too, and I always think Lake Winnipeg, but I don't even think past going into the North Basin, which is a whole different ballgame too.
Oh yeah.
With all the ginormous pike and all that. But it's crazy to think the species that are in Lake Winnipeg that we probably rarely ever seen. Like, you'll know that one Uncut Angling video where there's a muskie in Lake Winnipeg.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah.
Like, now I'm sure that was true, but this was 10 years ago, and they probably got, again, completely through natural selection. They probably just died off or whatever.
I guess they caught it in a net too.
Yeah, they caught it in a net. Sorry about that, guys. Camera batteries died. We're back. Where were we?
North Basin, Lake Winnipeg. Yeah. Very bizarre muskie up there, supposedly.
Yeah. Sorry. Not natural selection, that's through evolution. That was wrong. But through, piker able to survive, muskie or not, muskie die off, pike take over, which is actually interesting because I read this thing today. It was in Fisherman magazine, and it made total sense. They were talking about like the very, very bottom of the food chain, because if you go more up the food chain, there's tertiary, I think that's how you pronounce it, tertiary consumers, top of the food chain, and then there's more energy as you go down the food chain. If that makes sense. So it's very bottom, like zooplankton and all that, super micro, shrimp, whatever. Yeah. And they're talking about how it's interesting because when one species starts to dwindle, this other species can then use this species dying off to their advantage, and this one species can completely accelerate.
Oh yeah.
Which is, I can't necessarily think of a definite example of that per se, but it makes total sense.
Well, there is definitely examples, but yeah, like you said, there's a big range of that for sure.
How certain things play out, and it's, what did Darwin say? It's not the strongest of species or the biggest or smartest. It's the one that's most adept to change.
Yes.
And I would say, for one, trout, let's say stock trout, definitely not. They can't even survive in their own pond.
They can't survive.
For example, the Lactobani ponds is like aerated, super protected, blah blah blah.
It's like Twin Lakes, still aerated. Yeah.
Anyway, and then there's carp. I mean, you'll see a lot of them like wash up on shore certain times of the year. Carp are awful. They're fun if you go to Delta Marsh in the spring. Don't get me wrong, but they hurt lakes because of the way they dig up the bottom and then they just disturb a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're very affected by zebra mussels as much.
No, just a softer species.
Which, again, I want to go down this path too. Zebra mussels is very interesting because, and this can also kind of sort of tie into photosynthesis. Zebra mussels are bad too because of the amount of oxygen they take up and the CO2 that they release. And when obviously there's too much CO2 and there's not enough oxygen, it creates a dead zone. The dead zone is just a certain part of the lake where there's literally no life. And Lake Winnipeg is kind of bad for that, especially with the algae bloom, which is caused by runoff. Runoff is through our rivers because it's a major inlet. It's an inlet. Now the more we think it's an inlet. If you have all this stuff coming in, like runoff from farmers, all this sort of stuff flowing in through rivers, the phosphorus, the intake of phosphorus
is ridiculous.
It's like a fertilizer, so it just completely just destroys it and has algae blooms.
Yeah.
If you go to Patricia Beach and all that, actually we're going to talk about this too. If you go to Patricia Beach and like shorelines of certain parts of the lake, it's like gross. You can smell it when you're driving. It was so bad.
Maybe when I went out with you, it like stained my boat.
It stained the boat. It stunk so bad. Interesting story. I did not know that Patricia Beach was a nude beach, by the way. Just for anyone that doesn't want to see a bunch of old Ukrainian men on a beach, don't go to Patricia Beach. But anyway, that's where I found all the algae and other stuff. The algae, but yeah, super bad. Zebra mussels. We don't have the rusty crayfish like Lake of the Woods does, which is good. The zebra mussels are bad. I can't even say. It's so weird because if you go to the shorelines of Lake Winnipeg, on the west side, it's more like a flat stone layer, whereas you go to the east side, like the west side is more of a Canadian Shield layout, the shores, whereas the east side is more like boulders and all that. But where I am, it's kind of more man-made, man-put boulders. But considering that there's not as much rocks as you go into the lake and all throughout, the zebra mussels are so concentrated at the shore because I've never really, I'll catch them past the rocks if they're just like in balls, like in the sand, I guess, or mud. But it's more towards the shores, but it's crazy. And they were definitely not as bad when I was younger. And I try and memorize and look back on everything that I can remember kind of before they hit super bad. And it was like the white bass, there was spots, and this is, I think, just fishing in general. Obviously, spots, over time, they're not as useful for whatever reason. And this is, I'm not a fish, so I won't understand why, but there'll be spots where certain years, for no good reason, this spot, so good, come here, limit out every day, and then the next year it's nope, you won't mark anything 150 feet radius around you. It's so weird.
And I can tie into that too on the Whiteshell Lakes. I have a seasonal campsite out on Big Whiteshell, and even just fishing it from being a little kid, I probably fished it since I was like 4 years old, but seriously started fishing it like, like 16, 17 years old or whatever. But like even just being present and dropping a line down, like the spots that I used to fish are not even in my range of wanting to go, like not even in my list of spots anymore, because like some spots I would fish in the springtime, like you said, limit out, like just one after another, walleye, pike even too. And now I go to those spots in 12 feet of water and they are weeds up to the surface. I can't even fish that spot anymore. Like it is the weirdest thing, because like, the weed growth and the algae growth in big whitetail too is actually not concerning, but like just really weird, because I've been finding that a lot of the shallow bays now.
Sorry, I'm like a hand up kid in class.
No kidding. All the shallow bays now, I call it sea snot, but it's like I don't know what to call it, like a clump of weeds that just stick to your hook on the bottom. It's weird. And anyways, your question?
Sorry,
statement?
Future fisheries biologist here. Anyways, chasing bread. Yeah, you'll learn in clear lakes, if the sun is able to penetrate the bottom easier, let's say it's shallow and it's a clear lake, it penetrates the bottom, it promotes algae growth. There's not, or just vegetation growth in general.
Can I ask you this? Algae growth and weed growth? Right?
Well, vegetation, like plants.
Yeah. Okay. So in the spots that I've been fishing, like 10 years ago, how come there's no weeds there, but now there is 7 years down the road?
Well, has it gotten any clearer? Is it cleaner?
It's just as clear as I remember it.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, then that is because the sun is heating up, global warming is real, the carbon tax is gonna kill us all. Matrix,
Okay,
conspiracy.
that actually makes sense.
Yo, let it quit.
That actually does make sense. The sun getting...
I don't know, I'm just...
No, honestly, that does make more sense, because if you think about...
We're all gonna die. That's it.
If you think about 10 years ago and the difference in climate change and, like how... I don't know.
It's
hot
been
the sun
a
was.
hot September.
No kidding.
It was plus 30 yesterday.
I was sun tanning a couple days ago.
What's
It's
the
so
dump?
weird. But yeah, like... But now those spots, I guess, have had more heat generated to them than like 10 years ago or whatever. It does make sense about the climate
What
change.
the Inside joke.
Ready? Can't do that.
So childish.
We're immature. We're all gonna die. Global warming.
Justin Trudeau for Prime Minister. Where were we? Anyway.
Nope.
So, we're just going to get in a rabbit hole of stupidity. Honestly,
It's
don't
gonna
know
go
why.
off course from here.
I'm going to put together a thesis eventually when I'm older. I'm going to figure out a lot of these problems I have concerns with. But for the next few years, I need to actually learn about the very basics. So,
You learn the mathematical equations, and I'll go test them out fishing wise.
Yeah. So, we're going to kind of end it off with this question here. So, I'm a broken record because I'm an advocate for it, but conservation, it's very important. I want the prolonged generation to enjoy everything that Manitoba has to offer. And I don't want to be ruined. And obviously, not everyone's perfect. Obviously, exceptions don't disprove the rule. Generally, people are good.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's just the minority that can be draw the most attention of people leaving trash, whatever.
Yep.
Not that I'm going to start getting all
Me.
against certain people. But, yeah, conservation is very important. And I was talking about this with the license because before I wanted to be a conservation officer, and a lot of the money comes from the government of Manitoba, and I think a lot of that money specifically comes from the money they make from licensing. So
for sure.
Hunting licensing, fishing licensing, trapping licensing. So as of right now, like I said, there's one license. There's two. There's a day license. It's like $12. A year license that goes from March 1st to April 30th of the following year. Something like that. But if you go more than 2 times a year, it makes sense to get the annual license. But before we had the regular license where there's a 6 walleye limit with a conservation license where it's a 4-person limit, and now it's just a conservation limit. So
One flat rate, which is
what are your thoughts
doesn't
on
make
that?
anything.
First of all,
Well, first of all, it doesn't make anything confusing.
Yeah.
What did I buy? Conservation or the standard one? Am I allowed 4? Am I allowed 6? No. Now it's 4 across the board, which I honestly like, because I mean it does take a toll on certain lakes, like we do say, one of the more smaller lakes for sure. But yeah, I really don't see any harm on like changing 6 to 4. Any harm, anyways, probably does more good than anything. But maybe raising the prices would be something
yeah. So
they would consider.
a few things I want to say. First of all, I think, and me personally, I'm I guess different than most people. I'm obviously for the fun of it, but when it comes to table fare, I'd rather just send them back and grow. Just me eating it's not worth it. I think it's just better to let it go and go do some good in its ecosystem. If that makes any rational sense.
Honestly, I can't even remember the last time I had a fish in my live well.
Yeah?
No.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I think it's absolutely great. The culture that comes with catching a fish, putting it on the table. And I don't at all disagree if people do it. I mean, I do it. But people who are like, yeah, well, why go to the grocery store with these prices, processed, whatever, when I can do it myself? I caught this. I cleaned this. I prepared this. I'm eating it. Like it does come with pride, I guess, in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
But the 4 walleye limit, I think, is good. I don't personally see the need for one person to have 6 walleyes. Let's say, for example, I don't like anything, honestly, even over 18 anymore. I feel like I'm like 17 to 18. I'm so picky at this point.
Yep.
Like, I could not. The limit, generally, I think it's like something weird. It's like 13 inches, and then it's like 21 and like 5/8 or something. I could not comprehend keeping a 21-inch walleye. I absolutely cringe when people do it or get really close to it. I could not do it.
Yeah.
Obviously, unless you kill it, it's only humane to keep it. Another side point, if a fish does die, let's say barometric pressure, which is when obviously there's a lot more pressure at the bottom, they come up, their air bladder can't accustom to that very fast, and it just inflates like a balloon, and they basically die. First off, there's so many turtles in shield lakes, or
eagles,
random
birds.
lakes, eagles, birds. Turtles will eat it. Birds will eat it. You'll see eagles all the time come and swoop it. It won't go to waste.
I know it's a bad sight to see.
Yeah.
See it float away from the boat or whatever.
50-inch
but
muskie. A muskie will eat it. No.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not talking about that.
Yeah.
But
like birds and turtles, it's not going to go to waste, like Nathan said.
But I think it's... Where was I before? What was I saying? Yeah.
Comprehending,
keeping 6 walleyes. You're telling me 12 fillets for one person, and then you could go out and do it the next day. There's no need. I don't think necessarily. For some people it is. I think 4 is perfectly fine. But, yeah, like you said, a lot of it's less confusing. But, super all 4 conservation programs, the Wet Shell Hatchery, Fort White Alive Center, all these places, I think they should absolutely get funding. I think they should get it in the right way, though. And I think the money, revenue, and stream, whatever, should all be from the same thing. I think that it should be coming from licensing, people who are actively fishing. It should then go to the people who are helping the fishing in this big circle effect. So I personally would be perfectly fine with paying more money for a license if it means that it's going to go to funding for our COs.
Yeah.
Like, there could definitely be more COs.
More fish research
Manitoba.
And like stockings or whatever that may be to help ecosystems out, right? Like,
they could make schooling easier for a conservation officer. I invite anyone to go on Google and figure out the requirements for it. It's not straightforward necessarily if you're residing specifically in Manitoba.
I'll put money on that.
But anyway, yeah, I think definitely money should be going to the COs. I love it when people who are not doing what they should be doing get caught and they get the penalty. It makes me so happy.
Even when they know they're doing it.
I'm not a bitter person, but I believe that you should be doing what is right, not what is easy. And you should be keeping your limits, and you should be... The rules are put in place not to benefit the people who make the rules specifically, but for the people who enjoy the activity.
The sport fishing.
The sport fishing. So when I see people keeping what they shouldn't be keeping, and they get slammed by a CO, it's great. But when there's no COs around and people are kind of getting away with it, it's awful. So I'm all for money going into COs and funding. I'm all for money going to the hatcheries to put it towards boats and I guess more staff and all sorts of equipment. I'm absolutely all for that. I think conservation is super important because if you talk about resources, there's perpetual resources, there's non-renewable resources, and there's renewable resources. Fish are not perpetual, they will not always be there. They're renewable, but meaning they can regenerate, but they need to do so without being completely destroyed. Like they can maintain themselves, but that's the problem, is that humans often get in the way of things.
Take care of, right?
And you got to take care of it because it doesn't take. It would take a very small population to do everything in their power to do bad that could destroy a lake.
Oh, for sure.
Like this is getting so whatever random, but if you took 20 super determined anglers to destroy Reynolds Ponds, they could get it done.
Oh yeah.
So
that was so random.
I know, but I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But like I said, exceptions don't disprove the rule. I think most people are good, but I do think all the money, and I know it does, as of right now, goes towards good things. But I think that you should always pay for your license. If you can donate to the Manitoba Wildlife Foundation.
And obviously follow the rules when you pay for your license. Do your research before you actually go out and practice your rights on the water, right?
There's more goes for hunting, but it does go to fishing. You are absolutely responsible for your actions. There's no excuse. The online resources that we have and the learning that we can do, there's no reason to not know the rules. It's just complete laziness if you go to a lake and you don't know the rules and then you do something you shouldn't. That's on you.
Yeah.
Make sure you know everything. I am sometimes bad for this, but then again, I don't look up specifically like the walleye regulations necessarily. I might regret saying that, but because I never keep fish.
Yeah.
An example, and I will not take a picture of that big fish to let it go. Yeah. Like that fish is more important to me than that picture. That makes sense. I just can't have that.
And just another thing, kind of a side note. I'm gonna do another side note on Nathan's side note. But fish care, taking care of fish in and out of the water to get them back. Obviously, like we're gonna get back on the topic of taking care of the fish so they get back. So they can, reproduce like walleye, pike, other fish like that. Okay, say what you want to say.
Okay. Uncut angling. Aaron Weeb is an absolute G. This man disappears off the platform of YouTube. He sees this epidemic. I don't know if this is the right word. He sees the problems associated with live imaging, which is absolutely ridiculous. Randy Blockhead, all this noise in this fishing world. Yeah. Live scope's bad. I think I talked about this last time. Let me get a little. I thought it was the whiny crybabies, the brokies that were the ones that had the problem with live imaging. I didn't know it was the pros too that were complaining about it. This was news to me. Yeah. But I think it's just a way to just talk and bring all this attention and just have all this click culture.
Oh, no kidding.
On the YouTube.
Yeah.
Anyway, absolutely ridiculous. This man comes out of retirement, absolutely destroys the angling buzz video they did on barometric pressure and crappies on Lake X. And if you go to that video now, if you go to the comment section, everyone is just like, no, Aaron Weeb just destroyed you guys. You guys completely failed doing the study.
Surprised they didn't take it down. To be honest with you. It's a terrible way of doing a study.
Absolutely awful. And he didn't. It's the way he articulated himself, and especially with the live imaging video, he didn't say anything. He just outlined the hypocrisy of people. It was absolutely phenomenal work. Uncut angling is an absolute.
It's not like, you guys suck. Yeah, this is not how you do it.
He didn't say a word. He used their own words against them and destroyed them in real time. Absolutely incredible. No, if you haven't watched that video, his kayak fishing videos. It was
like 3 videos or something.
Absolutely unreal. Yeah. Definitely go watch it. But his barometric pressure video, and then he did a following. This man spent like 5 days as a hermit He spent New Year's in an ice shack to do a study. I guess I'd call it a study.
That's a legit study.
Yeah. But it's a movement at this point. It's just a spiral effect. This person does the right thing, boom, takes care of fish, outlines it, teaches other people. Boom, little Jimmy's like, yeah, I'm going to follow that guy. I'm going to make sure I take care of my fish too. I was exactly the same way. I couldn't hold a fish properly.
We're the little Jimmies.
Yeah, we were the little Jimmies. I'm like, because I used to like, I'm going to be honest, we all learned. I couldn't hold the
fish on their head.
Yeah, it's awful.
Well, you're still kind of bad for this, but taking
What?
20 minutes to take a hug out of the fish's mouth is absolutely ridiculous.
I'm going to be honest, that was the old me. You haven't fished with me enough lately.
I haven't fished with you all summer. I said I haven't fished with you all summer.
Oh, yeah.
Fished with you twice. But we didn't.
Ugly stick pliers, game over. I'm built different now.
I use my hands.
Okay, well, I don't. Jeez.
That's another topic.
He was the same. So, yeah, I think I just wanted to, Aaron Lee was an absolute master class.
That was a big side note. That side note turned into a very big note.
Yeah. Well, I think all the money should go to conservation. I know it already does, but if they increase, I guess what I'm saying is if they increased it, I would be all for paying more for it.
Oh yeah.
What? I was gonna say what else would I spend my money on? But I was gonna say like fishing rods, V-Bucks. There's a lot of other things I could spend my money on. Yeah. Okay, sorry. Is there anything you want to add?
No, I honestly think we covered a lot and a lot of side notes, which
It's been 53 minutes, yeah.
Most of our side notes do, well, okay, some
Right.
of them.
Most
of them connect into our topic.
This whole podcast is not very linear, but please appreciate that we go on the whim. There's not a whole lot of script here.
We don't have any
I'm just
papers
this naturally smart.
Notes on our hands, nothing.
No, I'm just naturally this smart and fluid and super likable and lovable and charming. I know. Anyway,
I disagree, but yeah, honestly, we're good on the fly. We'll say that.
Yeah. They call me Marty McKay.
Okay, now we're done. Now we're done.
Thank you so much, Sasha Spinnis, for sponsoring this podcast. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really enjoyed talking about this. We're definitely going to be doing, not definitely, but I would like to do a part 2 in the near future. So make sure you hit that subscribe button to be notified when that video does come out. I'm Nathan Blank.
I'm Caden Parisian. We'll see you in the next one.
See ya.
Boom.
Bro, I did not just say
It's called this morning with flat. Really? There's no way.
I'm not real. I'm literally not real. I'm an NPC.